Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfic. Today will be the continuation of If We're Being Honest. This will be part 2, chapter 2, entitled The Quirkless Kid. Everybody stared at Izuku, who just stared right back. The truth quirk must have been overloaded or something, because no one said anything. Yeah, so much information was probably firing through their brains that nothing was coming out of their mouths, or they just stopped talking or thinking altogether. Either one. The second one was happening to Izuku. He said what he said and he couldn't take it back, so his mind was now horrifically blank, and he definitely didn't want to think of the massive can of worms that he had just opened. But alas, it was not meant to be. Ida was still smiling, but it seemed frozen on his face, like once the sentence had reached his ears he just stopped. What? Izuku felt like crawling in a hole and dying. I feel like crawling in a hole and dying. Deku. Katsuki had his head firmly on his desk in what could have been exasperation or just pure defeat. You moron! Problem child, Aizawa said as he stood, his hair floating and eyes glowing a dangerous amount. I will give you one chance. Explain. Izuku's mouth went dry, but somehow that didn't stop him from talking. All Might's quirk was called One for All, and it's been passed down for generations. I'm the next holder, and it's why I was so bad with my quirk at the start of the year and why All Might lost his power. Why don't you just go ahead and tell them every single embarrassing moment you've ever had in your life while you're at it, he thought to himself. Or that you're afraid of spiders, or that Kachan bullied you, or that you used to be... A bunch of voices cut off his thoughts. It seemed that the quirk could only be held off by confusion for so long, and soon everyone's voices were assaulting his ears, questioning Izuku and everything they had ever known about him. Questions about how that was possible, what kind of quirk it really was, when he got it, if All Might broke his bones too, if Izuku had to lie to them, or if he just chose to, and wow, that one stung. Enough. The stern voice of Aizawa rang throughout the classroom, and his matching glare somehow quieted everyone down. Now, I know everyone is very interested. He shot a pointed look at Izuku as he spoke, with what Midoriya just revealed to the class. However, this is not the time for questions, as we are all still in school. Although, he continued with blood-red eyes that stared into Izuku's very soul, making him gulp, I would like to ask a few questions of my own, if that's all right with you. He was sweating buckets now. Why do I feel like I don't have a choice, sir? Aizawa smirked slightly. So you do have a brain. Good. What I would like to know then is why you didn't use that brain and inform me that you were unable to use your quirk correctly because you weren't born with it. Just how long did you have it before the start of the year? Oh, great. He was dead. I got it the morning of the entrance exam, sir. Gasps and whispers broke out throughout the room, and Izuku had to fight the urge to put his face in his hands. Wait! Uraraka suddenly yelled. You hadn't used your quirk before you saved me from that robot? Of course that would be what she would focus on. Yeah, I honestly had no clue what I was doing. Why then? Aizawa said very calmly. Did you not say anything? Well, he and All Might had a good run, right? I wasn't supposed to, sir, he said quickly. Just rip off the metaphorical band-aid at this point. It wasn't my secret to tell, and All Might didn't want anyone to know that his quirk was transferable. Did Aizawa's eye just twitch? I see. He looked around the room, almost as if he were daring anyone to say anything, and honestly, everyone still looked too shocked to speak up. Take your seat, Midoriya. I suppose All Might and I will have to have a little chat after class. And Izuku took his seat, and tried to ignore the 19 pairs of eyes following him. He desperately wished he could warn All Might of his coming demise. After class was finally over, Izuku tried to make a run for it. He really, really did. He figured if he could get back to the dorms quick enough, he could hide in his room to avoid any questions his classmates would ever try to ask him. Could he get permission to stay in his room for the whole month? No, that was too much. But as he was packing his stuff up in record time, Aizawa's voice made him flinch. Midoriya, please see me after class. Izuku pointedly avoided everyone's gazes as they left, well, except for Shoto, Uraraka, and Ida, who looked at him with a great deal of worry in their eyes. But Izuku just waved them off with a promise to meet back at the dorms. But once everyone had left, Izuku made his way to his teacher's desk with a sense of foreboding. Look, sir. I'm sorry you were forced to reveal that in front of the class, Aizawa said, much softer than before, surprising Izuku. I also apologize for my rudeness. I know something like quirk status isn't easy to share. I was simply taken aback and ashamed that we didn't accommodate for your lack of experience correctly. Izuku looked at him, mouth agape in shock. It's my fault, sir, for not telling you. No, that's All Might's fault, and he held up a hand before Izuku could defend the previous #1 hero. He had a responsibility to teach you as his protege. That was more important than his secret. Even telling just me would have been enough, and I'm sure you're well aware that I wouldn't have said anything to anyone. Izuku nodded. I understand, but he's also valued his image as a natural-born hero too much for me to have asked anything else of him, and I got it under control eventually, right? I was able to train with someone who knew about it during our internships. Aizawa huffed, seemingly considering his words. I was wondering why you chose such a bizarre internship, even if that was your only offer. And I know you looked up to All Might, and the trust you have in him isn't misplaced. I simply believe he could have handled the situation better. Izuku sighed. Aizawa was right, if he was being honest. All Might could have shared his problem with more teachers. He could have been training more effectively, and maybe he would have even had more control by now. I'm glad you think I'm right, problem child, Aizawa said dryly. Blinking in surprise, Izuku realized that he had said all of that out loud. Again. I've got to stop doing that. His teacher simply chuckled. At least you have an excuse right now. Try and work on that now, and it'll be easier when this blasted quirk wears off. He gave a determined nod. I'll do my best, sir. Izuku was hoping for some sort of miracle. Really anything could have worked. He could throw up on the spot as soon as he walked in the dorms and rush to his room claiming to be sick. All of his classmates could have been suddenly hit by a different quirk that would make them unable to speak. Or maybe only able to speak Russian. He could simultaneously break his arm and have to go see Recovery Girl immediately. Actually, that last one might be doable. Unfortunately, though, none of those seemed to occur before he made it into the dorms, and he was walking very, very slowly, too. And as luck would have it, all of his classmates were sitting in the common area, obviously waiting for him, except for... There you are, Shoto said, coming up to him from where he had been clearly pacing. He reached out and gave Izuku's hand a reassuring squeeze. Are you okay? Was it bad that he liked this version of his boyfriend more, who was more open and wasn't quiet out of fear of awkwardness or just plain fear? Of course he loved every part of him, but he hated seeing how much Shoto struggled because of the things he couldn't control, like anxiety. Anxiety was a bitch. I'm perfectly fine, and I'm going to go up to my room now, he tried to say. I'm slightly panicking about this, but for some reason I don't really want to be alone right now. He hadn't even realized it until he said it, but he really didn't want to be alone. If he was, he would certainly start spiraling, and nothing good would come of that. This truth quirk knew him better than he knew himself, apparently. The thought was only slightly terrifying. You can come sit with us, Deku, Uraraka said from her place on the long couch. She was sitting next to Ida, and between her and Sue, there was enough room for him and Shoto. We'll try our best to respect your boundaries, right, guys? A chorus of agreements rang out, and Izuku could tell they all had discussed this before he arrived. It honestly warmed his heart that they would be so considerate of him. He was certain that they wouldn't hesitate to let him go up to his room if he wanted to, and, oh boy, there was a part of that he wanted to, but the thing was that he trusted them, just like he had told All Might. These people were his family, and he needed their support right now. Okay, Izuku said, shocked beyond all the words that he was able to keep himself to that. But still, I trust you guys. You're like family to me. Aw, Midoriya, Mina gushed from her seat. We love you too. Izuku couldn't help the mistiness in his eyes as her words registered. He was still holding Shoto's hand, and he subconsciously latched onto Uraraka's as they sat down. Yeah, love you guys. The silence that followed wasn't exactly awkward, but it was obvious that nobody knew quite what to say. Izuku definitely had no idea how to break the ice. What do you say when you accidentally blurt out one of your biggest secrets? I feel like we're going to be here a lot, Shoto stated bluntly, cutting off all the silence. If this quirk continues how it's been going. A couple of people chuckled at his meager attempt at starting up the conversation with a joke. I feel like we should at least set some ground rules now. Like no asking direct questions unless the person gives explicit permission, Kaminari said before awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. As much as we can help it, anyway. This quirk is really making your words work for you, isn't it? Kirishima teased. Kaminari stuck out his tongue at him, but laughed nonetheless. Yeah, you could say that. But he's right, Ida said. We should try to keep the questions to a minimum, especially when secrets come out. We should only be together if the person feels comfortable with it. He glanced at Izuku. Are you comfortable with us being here? You said you didn't want to be alone, but if you wish, we can limit this to a small group. Izuku shook his head, smiling despite his turning gut. Honestly, you all already know most of the story, and like I said, I trust you." He paused for a second and took a deep breath. "And if you guys want to ask me questions, go ahead." "Are you sure?" Several people asked this and other variations of it at the same time, which made him smile even wider. "Yeah, I am. Plus, I want everyone to know that we can trust each other, in case something like this happens with anyone else." He let the words hang in the air, and everyone seemed to realize what he was saying. More people were probably going to reveal their secrets, and he wanted to set a good precedent of communication and support. He was just going to ignore the anxiety in his gut for now, he supposed. "How did he give you his quirk?" Yamomo asked, almost immediately causing everyone to stare at her. Face red, she quickly spoke again. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to sound insensitive. I've just been wondering, and once you said that we could ask questions, I just couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore." "It's okay," Izuku said, giving her what was hopefully a warm smile. "If you mean the how as in the type of quirk it was, or transferable quirk that's been passed down for 9 generations, and if you mean the transferring part, I ate a strand of his hair." Everyone stared at him. Shoto was looking at him very strangely. "What?" "I ate a strand of his hair, DNA transfer. Very anticlimactic, if you ask me." And as if a switch had been flipped, the tension in the room was gone, and it was replaced by 20 hysterically laughing teenagers. Even Katsuki was hiding a chuckle or two. With the tension gone, the questions flowed out of everyone's mouths easily. Izuku did his best to answer them, all the best he could. No, All Might never broke his arms. No, he didn't know who had held it before. But he did know that the person that held it before All Might looked like his mother, apparently. Yes, he could transfer it if he wanted to. No, he didn't want to. No, he wasn't going to accidentally give it to Shoto by kissing him. That question left him very red in the face, and he didn't have to look over to know that the other boy was red too. No, he didn't seek out All Might. He was just sort of at the right place at the right time. "That's so lucky, though," Mina said excitedly at that. "To think the #1 hero choosing you." Izuku looked down and thought. He used to think the same thing, that it was all luck, and that he had nothing to do with it. Some of it definitely was luck, but a lot of it was on him, too. He told them just as much, not really going into detail, but still getting the point across. "All Might helped me realize that I really did put a lot of work into being able to handle his power. I trained pretty much ruthlessly for about a year, and I still could hardly handle it. At least my arms didn't fly off." "Man, no wonder you broke all your bones," Kirishima said with a low whistle. "Your arms flying off makes you sound like what you did during the sports festival sound tame." "Yeah, that was pretty intense." He glanced at Shoto, who seemed to be looking down guiltily. "And I would do it again if it meant you would still use your fire." "Wait," someone said quietly. "Why didn't he use—" "I have a question," Sue said, unknowingly cutting off whoever was already talking. Izuku could feel Shoto start to relax beside him, glad that that wasn't going to be brought up. "Yeah, ask away," he said absent-mindedly, still a bit worried about that particular topic being breached. "What was your quirk before One for All, Ribbit? Did it go away, or did it somehow combine with All Might's?" One question not asked, but one that would have been worse in its place. Definitely worse for Izuku, at least. Well, better him than Shoto, he supposed. He almost shot a hand to his mouth to stop himself, but the quirk was too fast. "I didn't have one. I was quirkless." And just like that, the tension in the air was back in full force, almost worse than before. Actually, scratch that. It was definitely worse than before. Izuku forced himself not to hyperventilate. So what if they knew he was part of the slowly dwindling minority of people? So what if they knew he was powerless most of his life? So what if his classmates knew that he had been seen as worthless? I was really hoping no one would bring that up. He couldn't help but say that, as everyone either stared at him or very pointedly avoided his gaze. "I'm not sure how you guys will see me now, if I'm being honest." That was redundant to say, wasn't it? No one laughed at the joke this time. The air was just as thick, if not thicker. "I didn't know," Uraraka said finally from beside him. He had forgotten that he was still holding her and Shoto's hands. "So that time you saved me, that was your first time ever using a quirk at all?" He felt himself nod. He seemed to be strangely detached from his body. Whether that was a good or bad thing, he didn't really know. "Yeah, I was terrified, to put it lightly. But I knew I couldn't just sit there, and my body just moved on its own." Uraraka let go of his hand. He was about to ask what he had done wrong when her arms flew around his neck in a bone-crushing hug. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered. And was her voice a bit wet? "You're going to be a great hero, Deku. The best." And now his eyes were definitely not dry as he hugged her back. "Thank you, and you too. You saved me right after, remember?" She giggled through her tears against his neck and just held him tighter. Quirkless people are statistically more likely to develop depression and anxiety, Ida said quietly from next to them, though it rang throughout the whole room. Izuku felt his blood run cold. They're more likely to be bullied and not reach the age of 18 due to hate crimes and suicide. Izuku pulled away from Uraraka very slowly. Yeah, I know. He looked at Ida, who was red in the face and had his hands clammed over his mouth. At Izuku's questioning gaze, he lowered them and spoke. I didn't mean to say that out loud, I swear, He looked at him with something close to anguish. I'm worried for you. You're my friend. Izuku tried his best to smile. It was probably very strained. It's okay, Ida. It's not like everyone here didn't know all that. And it was true. They had studied quirkless statistics in their hero courses because they needed to know how to help those people who couldn't help themselves. Izuku kept his head down for most of that week. It seemed that everyone else was remembering that he, someone who also participated in class discussions, had barely spoken a word during those lessons, and the worry on their faces deepened. As if sensing the oncoming panic, Izuku waved his arms in what was hopefully a placating gesture and gave his best fake smile. I'm fine now, guys, really. I'm happy and I have all of you guys, and a quirk, and I don't know what else to ask for, really. Now? Shoto asked quietly beside him. Stupid truth quirk, making everything I say a technically accurate statement. He thought bitterly, smile still on his face. Yeah, I'm fine now. He tried to say it nonchalantly, like nothing was amiss, but most of the class was definitely smarter than that. They weren't in the top hero program in the country for nothing. Meaning you weren't okay before, Sue said after a moment of silence. She wasn't ever one to beat around the bush. I guess you could say that, he said in defeat, smile slipping off his face, knowing this conversation was happening whether he wanted it to or not. Did you ever try to, Shoto said from next to him, eyes very pointedly trained on the floor. He seemed to be trying very hard to keep his face blank. He never finished, but the hesitation, even with the truth quirk, made what he was asking clear as day. No, Izuku said immediately. Tension left everyone's bodies at that, but some of them literally releasing their held breaths. But the stress on everyone's shoulders was back, and Izuku cursed this stupid quirk for the 1000th time today. I was definitely depressed. I didn't really have a future. He looked at his hands in his lap, closing himself off from the world as he spilled his deepest secrets, even deeper than his quirklessness. I can't say I never thought about it. Shoto and Uraraka instantly grabbed his shaking hands tightly as soon as he said that, and he held on to them for dear life. He could feel Ida's hand on his shoulder and Sue's on his knee, and he must have closed his eyes at some point, or they were too full of tears for him to see anything. You can go to your room, Midoriya, someone said. He vaguely wondered how hard everyone was trying to stay quiet. If you don't want to say anything else, we can all leave, if you need us to. He shook his head and he ignored his heart pounding against his ribcage. It's okay. It almost feels good to get this off my chest. I never told anybody, not even my mom. The words were pouring out of his mouth now, and he wasn't sure he could stop them if he tried. I didn't tell her about the anxiety, or the bullying, or the suicide rating, or the way the teachers looked at me like I was a pity project, or the guilt about how my dad left and I thought it was my fault because he didn't want a quirkless son. I never told her anything because I didn't want to burden her. He was struck with a sudden realization, and his stomach dropped. And here I am now, shoving all this on you guys. Don't. Uraraka lifted his chin so he was looking at her dead in the eyes, the same eyes that now had several tear tracks under them. If you think for 1 second that we won't support you with everything we have, then you can suffer 19 hugs at the same time until you finally get it through that thick skull of yours, maybe even 20 if we can rope Aizawa into it. He snorted lightly through the tears. I doubt he'd agree to anything like that. Probably not, she said with a slight smile, but I know everyone here wouldn't hesitate to throw themselves headfirst in helping you, right, guys? A loud chorus of agreements rang through the room, as if it had been rehearsed. He looked around to see everyone giving him wide, tearful grins, and he couldn't help but smile back. But you are okay now? Ida asked him, worry ever present in his eyes. It looked like he'd been crying as well, and Izuku's heart broke a little. He felt a smile slip away. Relatively, yeah, I'm much better. I still get sad sometimes for, no reason, and I'm a little anxious at times. Getting out of bed is sometimes harder than it should be, too, and being All Might's successor can be pretty stressful, I guess. I see. Ida pushed up his glasses and looked down like Izuku's weirdly specific answer was completely normal. May I ask that you inform someone if things get bad again, or tell one of us if you're feeling that way?" He felt himself nod, and tears slowly filled his eyes, but he was able to keep them from falling. "If you guys want me to, I can, but I don't want to be a burden or anything." "You're not." It was Shoto's turn to gently turn his head and look into his eyes. "You aren't and will never be a burden. We all care about you, and we won't stop caring unless you become part of the League of Villains or something. Even then, I think I'd follow you, because I trust your judgment more than the Hero Commission." That got a bit of a laugh out of Izuku again, and he watched as something softened in Shoto's eyes at the sight. "Noted." "Please don't join them," Jiro said, sounding a bit frightened. "I don't think Japan would stand a chance." Izuku looked at her in surprise, but everyone else seemed to jump onto what she said, saying he would be a terrifying force to be reckoned with. "Don't worry, that's not something I plan on doing, trust me." He felt a bit touched, though, that they thought so highly of him, in a weird way. "You're so strong, Midoriya," Yamomo said suddenly, "and not just with your quirk. You smile every day, even though you've been through all that. You really will be a great hero." More words of affirmation rang through the room, and once again Izuku couldn't contain his tears. "Thanks, guys. That means a lot to me." They talked a bit after that, but soon Izuku was yawning and struggling to keep his eyes open. He only went to bed at the insistence of his friends, because they knew he was coming down from an adrenaline high. Who knew spilling your guts could be so tiring? He also told him that he was going to be fine going up by himself, and that if it wasn't even all that late, so they shouldn't trouble themselves with him. They agreed reluctantly, if only because they knew he was being honest, and he said he would be fine. And he knew he would be, because he knew he was going to pass out as soon as he hit the pillow. Or he would have if there hadn't been knocking on his door as soon as he was ready to sleep. He went to answer it and was surprised to find Shinso standing there sheepishly. "Hey, I'm sorry." "What?" Shinso rubbed his arm awkwardly. "I wanted to apologize to you for what I said a while ago. I'm sorry." Izuku was drawing a blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." He winced at his own words. "Sorry, that was blunt." Shinso's lip quirked upwards. "It's okay, it was a while back. I mean, during the sports festival, when I said you didn't know what it was like to be born with nothing and how you had everything handed to you in life." He nodded slowly in realization before shrugging. "It's okay, you couldn't have known." Shinso stared at him. "But it's not okay. I assumed everything about you only based on what I saw in front of me. I was bitter about my own past, and I forgot that other people struggled too." That was a lot to unpack for sure, but Izuku did his best to keep his mouth shut of any questions. If Shinso wanted to share anything more with him, he would say something. He knew firsthand what it was like to have your secrets exposed. But still, he appreciated the words enough to smile and force himself to speak carefully. "Thank you. I appreciate it, really. I forgive you, but I don't really think there's anything to forgive. I understand." Because he definitely did understand, being envious of those born with privilege. Shinso hummed. "Thanks." They said goodnight to each other, and Izuku was on his way to bed when another knock pierced through the room. Slightly annoyed with the fact that he wasn't going to be able to sleep, once again he went to answer the door, but his heart melted at the sight of Shoto. "I knew you were stretching the truth when you said you'd be fine," he said. "I know you don't like being alone." But Izuku couldn't help the smile that he let in when he let him in. "Fine, you caught me, but I'm still going to bed." "I'm tired too. Want to cuddle?" At that his face turned beet red, and Izuku swore he could see steam coming from his left side. "Sure," he said with a light laugh. Face also red. They got into bed together, and it was the most comfortable Izuku had been in weeks. "I like you like this. Is that bad?" he said once they were both settled. They both faced each other, heads next to each other, and arms around each other. Shoto shook his head. "I don't think so. I like me like this, too." Izuku hummed, letting his eyes slip shut. It was a moment before Shoto spoke again. "I'm glad you told us. I never would have known." Izuku shrugged, exhaustion trying his best to calm him. "I probably would have told at least you eventually, and I meant what I said. I'm mostly fine now. Plus, it's nothing really compared to what you went through. I mean, it was different, but we had a lot of similar struggles that I didn't know about until tonight. You didn't have a future. I had one I couldn't escape." Izuku's eyes shot open. "What?" Shoto had the audacity to laugh. "Now you know how I felt earlier." Izuku hit him in the chest before pulling him close. "That's not funny." Shoto held him tightly, but nonetheless said, "It's a little funny." "Nope, I won't have any of your dark humor in my bed. He pulled him closer and let himself tell the truth. I'm glad you're here. Shoto's breath hitched. I'm glad you're here too. Don't leave me, okay? I won't. Don't leave me either. I won't. This concludes Chapter 2 of If We're Being Honest. I love this one so much, and it cracks me up, so sorry for laughing during that one. We'll pick up with the next chapter as soon as possible. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.